Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our September 24th grant funding workshop. My name is Jeff Schmidt. I am the GIS and intern coordinator at Arizona State Parks. I'm also heavily involved with the grant program, primarily reviewing cultural and environmental documentation and working with ADOT EPG and the State Conservation Office to complete Section 106 and process. Joining today is Matt Eberhard. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. We're using the laptop speaker to be able to communicate with you guys this morning. I'm the State Off-Highway Vehicle Coordinator, so I'll primarily be here to answer questions related to motorized projects and those funding opportunities. We appreciate you all being here today, and I'll be the one kind of managing the chat box. If you have questions as we go through, go ahead and use the chat in a manner that I can share them with the group and make sure everybody hears them. Because if you have the question, I'm sure somebody else has had one similar. So there are no bad questions today. We're happy to be able to provide these workshops to you and hopefully guide you through this process a little bit better and answer any questions you might have. So thanks for joining us.
Mickey Rogers, our Chief of Grants and Trails, is unable to join us today, but in his absence, Matt and I will do our best to present this information in a way that is easily consumed, and also do our best to answer any questions you have. If we don't have the answer, we'll certainly take note of it. We'll find the answers for you, and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Just like Matt just said, if you have any questions, go ahead and just type them into the chat box. We'll stop occasionally and read off those questions. If you have your cameras on, you can go ahead and turn those off. We don't need those cameras on today. And if you've not already done so, if you go ahead and mute yourself, unless you actually have a question, we would greatly appreciate that. It makes it difficult to hear sometimes. So with all that out of the way, we'll get started.
And everybody can hear us okay?
Yeah, is anybody having any issues hearing us? You just type it in the box if you are. Thank you, Jim. So the purpose of this presentation, really, and the purpose of this entire workshop is just to provide a high-level overview of the entire kind of grant process. As you can see, this slide provides an overview of the topics we'll discuss today. Start by highlighting the various funding opportunities we have available, including the Recreational Trails Program, Off-Highway Vehicle Program, and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Following our overview of each opportunity, we'll discuss some of the important policies, the application process, post-award process, as well as some tips that we have on submitting and administering a successful grant application. Depending on how much time we have left, we'll take questions, but please, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them throughout the presentation. It's pretty much me and Matt talking for 2 hours, so any break we can have to answer some questions, we certainly appreciate. We have this workshop scheduled for 3 hours, but during the pandemic, we've done a few of these so far, and they've usually lasted around 2 hours. So we'll probably get you out of here a little early today, unless you have some real pressing questions. So this first slide provides a very high level overview of basically the entire grant process. The first point that we would like to emphasize, we've got a lot of questions on this, is that funding can be applied for at any time. We don't have any application windows anymore. So whenever you feel you're ready to start an application, we are accepting them. Now, while it can be applied for at any time, RTP projects, we're required to provide a list of projects to ADOT that we intend to obligate these monies to. That has to be done by the end of May. So that being said, you can submit at any time, but if you submit an RTP application in mid-April or beyond, it is likely that you won't receive funding until the next fiscal year. So again, this slide outlines the entire grant process. As you can see, it starts at the top left. The first step in the process is to reach out to grant staff and to register for our online grant system, Web Grants. Registration to this system is free. Once you've registered, reach out to grant staff to discuss your proposed project. Staff will help you determine if your project activities are eligible. We'll help direct you to the correct funding opportunity and pretty much authorize you to begin an application. Please don't start an application without first talking to staff. We've had several applicants complete applications for the wrong funding cycle or submit completed applications for activities that aren't even eligible. So please save everybody involved time. Reach out to us before you start your application. We'll give you some guidance if your kind of your proposed activities are eligible, and we'll get you started in the right funding opportunity. Once you speak with us, we get you set up. We'll get you started on your pre-application. Is not applicable to funding opportunities. There's no pre-application for the safety and environmental education grant, which we'll discuss later. But most of these funding opportunities do require applicants to complete a pre-application. Pre-applications are pretty basic. It's basically some contact information for the sponsor, contact information for the sponsor agency, a short project summary, and some basic budget information. That's pretty much comprises the pre-application. Once you're completed with that, you'll submit it. Staff will review again to ensure that all the proposed activities are eligible and that there aren't major issues with the application. Once any issues are resolved, staff will approve the pre-application and will provide instructions on how to begin your application. We'll go into the actual application process, some of the forms and some of the things that are involved with that later. But once you have completed your full application and submitted it, staff will review. We actually receive a notification from our online grant system that a new application has been submitted. We'll reach out to you. We'll confirm that we've received the application. We'll discuss this a little bit. Again, we'll discuss this more in greater depth in the presentation, but make sure when you're completing your application that you actually submit it. That's an issue we have often, is that applicants go in, they think they're finished their application, but they never actually submit it in the system. When that happens, we don't know that the project is complete, that the application is complete and it's ready to review. So again, we'll hit on it later, but make sure that you hit submit in Web Grants. So once the full application is submitted, staff will go in, we'll review the application. We try to do it within 2 to 4 weeks. If we notice any issues during this kind of initial review, we'll reach out and request additional information. Most often, these issues are related to the budget, Section 106, the CC, the Cultural Clearance Review Form, the NEPA form, all of which we'll discuss later. Any questions, Matt?
Nothing coming through right now. Yeah, with with our application process, like Jeff mentioned, we used to have set cycles in which you could apply. We really tried to make an effort to see grant funding expedited, streamlined, and easier and more transparent for the end user. So we welcome applications, like you said, anytime throughout the year. As far as when to contact us, really anytime is fine. You can shoot us an email. You can email grant staff at azstateparks.gov at any time, and that goes to Jeff, Mickey, and I. So we can all see that, and we can all respond, or we can call that person back and let the other two know, hey, I handled that. But grant staff at AZ State Parks is going to be one of the best ways, unless you have a specific question for Jeff, Mickey, or myself. You can email us directly. But no, there's no day or time that's better than the other to contact us. We're here. So
I'll just speak for myself. It's probably easier to email me. It's just, I'm in front of my computer all day. I have my email up all day. If you shoot me an email, that's probably the best way to get in contact with me. But you can also call. Yeah, like Matt said, there's no specific day better than others. So once internally we review the application, we determine that the proposed activities are eligible and the application and all the associated materials are present. We'll pass the application along for the NEPA and Section 106 approval. Who reviews these applications is kind of dependent on the funding source. Any projects that receive federal funding, like RTP program, is reviewed by Arizona Department of Transportation Environmental Planning Group. ADOT-EPG review process currently takes between 60 and 100 days, or 120 days. Any projects receiving state funds will be reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office. Right now, their reviews probably take between 30 and 60 days. LWCF applications, it's a little bit different. It's strange because it's a federal grant, but it's administered at the state level. So we actually send that information to SHPO. Once we get SHPO's concurrence, we will attach that to your application, and that gets sent to the National Park Service, who conducts those reviews on LWCF applications. Pretty much at the same time that we send these to be reviewed and approved by ADOT and SHPO, we'll start to work the application through the advisory and board approval process. It's at this point that I would like to clarify that State Park staff does not, we don't select which grants receive funding. Grant staff reviews these applications. We ensure that the proposed activities are eligible for the specific funding opportunity, but if and how much funding a project receives is determined by our advisory committees, which are ASCOT, the Arizona State Committee on Trails, OFHAG, the Off-Highway Vehicle Advisory Group, and AORC, the Arizona Outdoor Recreation Coordinating Commission, as well as the State Parks Board. We want to make it clear that we don't approve these applications. We simply determine their eligibility and we facilitate them in the review process.
And to piggyback on those different committees and stuff, the everything but the board is basically a recommendation. AORC, OFHAG, and ASCOT all serve in an advisory capacity to the State Parks Board. The State Parks Board will then be the final decision as to whether or not they are actually approved for funding or not. So if you attend any of the meetings as an applicant, we strongly recommend that you do, if you have project that's up for review at any level, we strongly advise that you attend those meetings, because there are sometimes specific questions that through the review process that they'll have that we aren't always able to answer because we're not, on the ground. We're not the boots on the ground for your project specifically. So just another tip, we strongly advise everybody to attend any of the public meetings when your project is up for review. But remember that at the end of the day, the board is who has the final say.
Maria needs that vendor number to attach.
And yeah, just to add, like Matt said, we'll keep, if you have an application that's
We're doing any traffic.
kind of in progress, we will keep you up to date as to when those meetings are happening. Because like Matt said, we process a number of applications. Some questions asked by the committees and the board are very specific, and given that we administer so many applications, it's difficult for us to respond to some of the specifics. So it definitely goes a long way if you are on the phone for those meetings. And again, we'll be in contact with you. We'll make sure that you're aware of the meeting date.
Question. Deanna has multiple voices on the audio.
Just simply send it out to I don't think you necessarily need to do a special events app.
Yeah, I think we have a couple people who are not muted.
Send it out to the special events committee.
Yeah, just give me a second. I'm kind of going through right now and
have been approved to host
making sure everybody's
a little narrative
standing.
email and ask anybody if they have any comments. Please let us know. Type of thing.
Old friend down in Florence, Hezekiah. All right. So again, we'll reach out. We'll keep you in the loop as to when these advisory and board meetings are happening, so you can come and kind of speak to your project. So once your application is approved by the advisory committees and the board, as well as ADOT-EPG or SHPO, staff will send a draft project agreement. We ask that you review this agreement, send it back to us with any changes that you see or any necessary changes. We'll make those changes. We'll send you a clean copy for you to sign. Please send this back to us within 30 days. We currently, we won't withdraw the applications, but we're getting to the point where if these agreements aren't returned to us in a timely manner, we will withdraw the funding. Once we receive your signed project agreement, our deputy director will sign, and then we'll send you a copy of that signed agreement as well as an approval to proceed. And you're pretty much ready to go. You can begin incurring expenses and submitting reimbursement requests. Once your project is underway, you'll be required to complete quarterly status reports. We'll organize another workshop at a later date to discuss kind of status reports and the claim and reimbursement process once your project has actually been approved. Depending on the funding opportunity, you will have between 6 months and 3 years to complete your project. Once the project is complete, you'll submit all the required closeout documentation, and we will officially close your project. That's, again, a very high-level overview of the process. Pretty simple, though, right? Any questions on this slide or just the process overall? Deanna, we'll talk about that when we go through each specific funding opportunity. But yes, most of our opportunities are on a reimbursement basis, which means you'll spend the money, you'll provide some type of proof of payment, an invoice. You'll provide that to us with the submitted claim, and we will reimburse that back to you. And I think that's an issue that we get often, is a lot of people don't reimburse. They don't realize that these operate on a reimbursement basis. So I like to get that out early in the workshop. Yeah, the off-highway vehicle program can advance up to 80%. I believe we're trying to get away from that, but we are still currently doing that. So if it's a off-highway vehicle project, funds can be advanced up to 80% of the awarded funds. Any other questions on the process? Saw something about status reports. Matt, can you read that?
Yeah, status reports are required quarterly. Can you submit or share with no reimbursement request? Yeah, so there's two things within the online system. There's your status report that is required quarterly, and then there's what are called claims, where you submit a claim for reimbursement or advance or payment related to the project. And those can be independent of each other. You don't have to submit a reimbursement request with a status report. Status report is basically just letting us know where you're at in the process, if you're having any hiccups, challenges related to the project, what progress you're making, things like that. The claims are submitted basically as frequently as you want to receive reimbursement or payment. Obviously, you'll find out later as we talk about this, there is a 6-month inactivity policy where you have to be active within a 6-month period to remain active and continue to receive funding. But we have a lot of applicants that will submit their claim or their claim and their status report together every quarter. We have some applicants that submit a claim every 2 weeks. I can tell you from a management side and from an applicant side that the quicker and the more frequent you're submitting those claims, the faster they're able to be processed, because we're not having to go through all of the supporting documentation for a 3-month period. We're just looking at supporting documentation for a 2-week period. So that if there's one piece of advice that I can give would be probably to submit your claims for reimbursement and payment and those types of things on a more frequent basis, just because it allows us to sort through all of the supporting documentation that's required with those to process payments. It just makes it that much faster. So,
and again, we just kind of wanted to bring these things up to make you aware that they are requirements of the program. Once you've been awarded a grant, we will actually organize another meeting to walk you through the specifics of completing these status reports and how to complete a claim. So just wanted to put it on everybody's radar that these are requirements, but we're not going to go too in depth on those today. So the next slide provides an overview of all of our available funding opportunities as well as eligibility, what uses are eligible, what type of grant it is, whether reimbursement or funds can be advanced. A little bit of how much funds can be applied for each funding opportunity, as well as the match and the time frame. It's a lot of information in this slide. This will be posted on our website, and anybody who wants just this specific slide, we can send it out to them. We just wanted to provide this as just a very broad overview of all of the different funding opportunities we have, and kind of just break everything down into one visual. So we won't spend much time on this, but if you'd like a copy, you can download it from the website, or just reach out to Matt, Mickey, or myself, and we'll send it over. So being through all of that, we'll actually dive into some of the specific funding opportunities that we have. The first being the Recreational Trails Program, which provides funds to develop and maintain recreational trails and trail-related facilities for both motorized and non-motorized recreational trails. Eligible applicants include federal, state, county, local, and tribal governments, as well as nonprofits. Similar to most of our other opportunities, this operates on a reimbursement basis. The amount of funds, maximum amount of funds that can be applied for is kind of variable based on project needs. If you have an aggressive timeline and all of the required documentation is in place, I believe right now the max amount we're allowing you to apply for is $150,000. So it was $80,000 a year or so ago, but we've upped it to $150,000. Time frame to complete these projects is 2.5 years. So we'll just run through kind of some examples of some of the items that this funding can pay for. Basically anything related to trails, restrooms, parking areas adjacent to trails, trailhead, staging area facilities, like ramadas and picnic tables. Features along the trail, such as gates, benches, or any signage. Funding can also be used to purchase easements, rights of way, and land for the development of new trails. Even though I believe that's much lower on the trails plan priority list, which we will discuss later on. Just a couple of examples of what this funding can be used for. It's really pretty diverse. And again, this is for both motorized and non-motorized trail uses. Any questions on the recreational trails program?
Let's see. Is there an administrative surcharge? I have heard that there was one on top of that.
Yeah, not for this program, not for recreational trails, but for the LWCF program, there is an administrative surcharge, which we will discuss in depth.
Can funding be used for NEPA?
It cannot.
It cannot. With recreational trails program money, it cannot.
Yeah,
With
there's a lot of caveats here, folks. We apologize for that.
with the off-highway vehicle recreation fund money, you can use it to establish NEPA and cultural surveys, which we'll get to here shortly.
All right. The next opportunity we'll discuss is the trail maintenance program, which is kind of a sub grant of the recreational trails program. The purpose of the trail maintenance program is to address routine maintenance on existing non-motorized trails. Let me say that again, existing non-motorized trails. Eligible activities include clearing pathways, repairing drainage, repairing fencing. It also allows for minor reroutes of existing non-motorized trails. We want trails to be built in a sustainable manner. We don't want crews to keep going out there and keep repairing the same portions of trail that get washed out every monsoon season. So we do allow small reroutes. So just keep that in mind. Similar to the recreational trails program, eligible applicants include federal, state, county, local, and tribal governments, as well as nonprofits. Currently, the max funding request for this opportunity is $50,000. It also requires a 5.7% match, which can be either in kind or cash. The time frame to complete these projects is 1 year. It's a pretty short period of time. One of the important pieces for this funding opportunity is that all work is completed by state contracted trail crews, which State Parks pays directly. So the idea behind this application is to take a lot of the reimbursement work off of the applicant's plate. Again, State Parks pays these crews directly. The sponsor is really not even involved in the reimbursement process. The idea is to get these funds out there on the ground, get these repairs done as quickly as possible, and get the trail back in the condition it should be. So we'll talk about our trail crews. We'll discuss the 3 state contracted trail crews. This contract with these 3 crews is, from my understanding, it's good until 2022. At that time, we'll be opening up a solicitation. So new applicants new trail crews can apply and try and get on to the state contract, so we can try and expand this list. But currently, these are the 3 state contracted trail crews. They are the Arizona Conservation Corps, American Conservation Experience, and Cuddy Mountain Trail Company. Doug, are you with us this morning? Thought we may have some of the trail crew members on the line today. I'm not sure if we do, but again, we can provide this information. It'll be in the presentation that's posted on our website. But we highly recommend that you reach out to all 3 of these agencies to at least discuss your project. I know they trails, so they'd be happy to discuss your project with you. If you want to take it a step further, you can certainly bring them out, and they will, give you a better idea of, sustainable alignments and kind of the trail alignment in general. Provide you some valuable feedback that they're professionals. Would be very, very helpful for your project.
So we got a question. The 1-year timeline, when does it begin? Is it when the project is approved? When the trail crew becomes available? Which is it?
Yeah, we realize that's kind of been an issue recently with COVID. I know at least AZCC and ACE have been kind of backlogged. So it's basically when the project agreement, when you receive your approval to proceed, is when the time starts. We'll work with you if you're working with these trail crews. You're basically kind of out of the process anyway, but we understand that delays have been occurring, and we're open to working with applicants to work through those issues. We understand though that it's been bad recently, and I'm guessing there's going to be a continued backlog, so we may have to adjust that 1-year timeline. Again, we'll work with you through this process. Any other questions on the trail maintenance program or the state contracted trail crews?
And again, just one more thing with the trail crews, they can provide guidance on funding and things like that, but if you need them to come out and actually do design work, they would require payment for that to do design work. They can come out and give you an estimate and look at, walk a trail and look at it and give you an estimate of what it would cost to develop it and get it off the ground or do the maintenance that's required. They can do that for free, from what I understand, to just take a look at it and provide a quote. But if you're wanting them to come out and do like a trail layout or trail design or, what's going to be the best path for this trail, I think in those instances it would require payment. But,
yeah, that's what they've conveyed to us at previous workshops.
And they do, as Jeff mentioned, they can get backlogged. They can be busy. With them being on contract, the nice thing is you can pick them, any one of the 3 of them, and just use them directly. They can provide you one quote. you can run with it. If you go outside of that contracted trail crew option, if you decide to go with another trail crew or something of that nature, you will be required to provide 3 quotes from outside vendors. That's kind of the caveat with them being on contract, is there are preferred vendors. So with all grants, you're required to adhere to our procurement standards and our procurement policies and procedures. So 3 quotes would be required if you're going outside of our contracted vendors. And one thing we've talked about recently with Mickey is in filling out your application, if you know who you're going to use, and it is our trail crew, you can outline that, like, hey, this many hours of an ACE trail crew doing work. But if you're going outside of the contracted vendors, your budget would have to reflect, we're going to be doing trail work on this trail with, and you'd have to leave the company blank because you would be required to get 3 quotes. And we've seen some people recently that have been saying, oh, we're going to use this company, which isn't one of the contracted trail crews, which would be a violation of the policies and procedures related to procurement, because you can't just select anyone. You have to get 3 quotes depending on the work that's being done. So that's why we strongly advise, talk to our trail crews early, get as much information as you can, try and get on their radar, try and get on their schedule, knowing, okay, my application's in the review process now. We're going to hopefully get a signature here, and then, kind of timeline out from there. So, and again, any questions throughout any of this, stop and ask, shoot it in the chat box.
If you are applying for the trail maintenance program, you do have to use one of these 3 crews. Like Matt said, if you're applying for a competitive trails program grant, you can choose any crew you want, but it has to follow the procurement standards, which we will discuss later on. So just these are some super extreme examples of the need for trail maintenance and just what the funding has been used for before. We'll kind of fly right through these, but pretty self-explanatory. Again, know the bid process, that's not required, so this application generally goes much quicker and get the funds on the ground much more timely. All right, the next program, which is also another kind of sub-program of the recreational trails program, is the Safety and Environmental Education program. Safety and Environmental Education program was developed to promote safety and environmental education related to both motorized and non-motorized projects. Eligible applicants include federal, state, county, local, and tribal governments, as well as nonprofits. The maximum funding request for this opportunity is $10,000, and the required match is 5.7%. Similar to the trail maintenance program, the time frame to complete these projects is 1 year. So we'll just go through some examples because I feel like this is one of the more diverse funding opportunities that we have, but I also feel like it's one of the lesser known and lesser applied for, and just kind of wish we'd get some more application. So here is an example from Skyline Regional Park out in Buckeye. They use funding to develop these small trail signs and kind of emergency markers. Here is a informational kiosk at a trailhead. This is one that we get all just did one up in Pine Top Lakeside. We've done a couple in the Sedona area recently. These are definitely eligible for C funding. I believe this is the Scottsdale Sonoran Preserve as an emergency marker. These are eligible. I think this was the Arizona Trail Association who used C funding to provide some trail building workshops. I actually think we have a couple recently submitted applications for stuff similar to this for trail building workshops and some stewardship and etiquette campaigns. We don't see enough of these. I would like to see more of these types of programs. This is the Red Rock Mountain Bike Patrol, which is a nonprofit in the Sedona area who rides Sedona trails and helps any trail users out there who are lost or in need of first aid or just any help in general. These guys are out there to assist. C funding, they've used it to buy their uniforms and some of their equipment.
So that kind of answers Jim's question. We had a question come in. Would Safe Tools be eligible for safety and environmental? So like tools for volunteers to be able to go out and do trail work and say PPE for them.
Yes, definitely. This is an example. The city of Phoenix started a campaign, Take a Hike, Do It Right. They used C funding to develop printed materials that they posted in prominent areas throughout the city. And this is something that State Parks recently did. It was actually pretty proud of it. It was just highlighted in the recent American Trails newsletter. We submitted for safety and environmental education funds to provide an interpretive program down at Kartchner Caverns State Park. Anybody familiar with Kartchner Caverns knows we have our cave tours, but we didn't really have any options for deaf or hard of hearing. So we use these funds to hire a sign language interpreter, which now goes on the tours and signs for any of our visitors that are deaf or hard of hearing. So I thought this was a really cool project. Thought it was a pretty unique use of the funds, and we want to see more applications that do stuff like this.
So we got a question from Jay McFarland. Unfortunately, a search and rescue side-by-side would not be eligible for safety and environmental education. With recreational trails program monies, the first thing is any products, tools, supplies, things like that you're buying have to be made in the USA. Supplies for the side-by-side? That might be a gray area. We could discuss offline. We could talk more about what specifically you're looking to get. But I know that with the recreational trails program, anything that's being purchased would have to be US made. So, and I think there may be one side-by-side company that does 100% US made side-by-side, and I believe it's Polaris, but I think it's pretty astronomical in pricing because of that. And then with the off-highway vehicle program specifically, we do not issue grants related to search and rescue. It's more focused or volunteer based or things like that. But we're to my section now, so we can start kind of diving into that stuff. But okay, if you want to set up a call with us after or outside of this meeting, we'd be happy to talk with you about the specifics related to getting supplies for for the side by side if that's eligible.
Yeah, I feel like it'd probably be more fitting under some of the different, one of our other funding opportunities. But again, those are the types of gray areas that we kind of encounter often. So feel free to reach out. We'll discuss with you offline.
Related to the rerouting of a trail, yes, there would have to be a survey in place for that reroute. As far as consulting with an archaeologist above and beyond that, they may sometimes require an archaeologist to be on site during any digging or dirt moving or trail construction in the event something is found. But that'll be at ADOT and SHPO's recommendation.
And we're gonna touch on that pretty in depth. So that's coming up later, and we'll kind of discuss those requirements.
All right.
Any more questions on the safety and environmental education program? All right, making good time here, folks.
Anything RTP, Recreational Trails Program? Not just safety environmental. Hearing none,
We will press on.
we'll go ahead and press on into my section, which is the off-highway vehicle recreation program. With our entire grant process, we have over the last 5 or 6 years really tried to streamline the application process, what's eligible, and how we get money to the end user so that the recreating public has better recreation opportunities. So within the off-highway vehicle program specifically, we used to have 2 funding opportunities, one in July and one in January. As Jeff mentioned earlier, all of our programs, you can apply anytime throughout the year. And then depending on when our boards and commissions meet and when our team is able to review the project, will determine when we're able to get it in front of the board for a possible approval. Within the off-highway vehicle program specifically, we've established what we call a subgroup of grants, which would be considered supplemental grants. The first one that we have, though, is
My bad.
the major section that we have is what we're considering competitive or large-scale projects. These can be applied for up to $750,000. They're reimbursement basis. This is eligible to tribal, nonprofit, local, county, state, federal, basically anyone interested in getting off-highway vehicle funding on the ground or things to make the off-highway vehicle community better. This can go to trail development, trail maintenance, related to off-highway vehicle use statewide, support facilities, educational materials, maps, kiosks, really anything you can think of. These require no match and are required to be completed within 2.5 years. That has changed. It used to be 3 years for these types of projects. We're again trying to expedite it. We've bumped it down to 2.5 years. And I think, over time, we'll probably try and get that down to 2 years for these larger scale projects. Because fortunately, what we've seen a lot of is applicants will receive a large portion of money. They'll be given a time window and it won't be spent within that time window, or the deliverable isn't received in time and they have to do extensions and all these types of things. And then the money just stays locked up with this one large project, which is where that 6-month inactivity policy comes into play, as well as the supplemental grants that we'll discuss here in a minute. Okay, so we got a question. Do you still have the rule in place that if an agency has an open grant with you, we cannot apply for another until that grant is concluded. So, depending on the category you're applying for, you can have multiple grants open at one time. I think Mickey said at one of our previous workshops, you can have upwards of 5 open grants at one time. Now, would I advise that? No. That would make for a very difficult management process on the user side of things, trying to navigate multiple projects at once. However, with the off-highway vehicle program specifically, you can have one of these large-scale projects as well as a supplemental open at the same time. And to that end, you could also have an RTP project open at the same time. So yes, you can have multiple projects open at once. However, in any one category, you cannot. So if you were submitting a large-scale off-highway vehicle grant for, say, $750,000, you would have 2.5 years to complete that before you could apply for a new one, and that would have to be completely spent or closed out before you could submit for another large-scale off-highway vehicle grant. Well, not before they could apply. Before
There you go.
That's yeah. Okay.
You can still apply. We will not award a second grant from the same funding opportunity until you've completed the first.
So, like, for instance, right now we have several applicants that have an active large-scale project that are nearing completion, and so they have already submitted their next grant to be reviewed. So that basically once it's reviewed and approved by the board, and their one that they have is closed out, they can jump right into, hey, send the agreement, sign it, and then they're off and running.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, if it's kind of a timing game, but if you can time it right, you could essentially close one and then open, actively start the process with the next one. So I know it's kind of crazy and there's a lot of moving parts, but that's why we call us, email us, soon enough. Hopefully you'll be able to come down to our office and meet with us
One of these days.
But yes, the short answer is yes, you can have multiple projects open at one time as long as they're from a different funding
Source,
category.
opportunity,
Funding opportunity, yeah. So, okay, projects in the northern part of the state will benefit from a 2.5-year time frame. Related suspensions projects for 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Can any reconsideration be given to adjust the time frame to less? So Lisa, are you asking if we can do less than 2.5 years? Or other parts? Okay, keep it at 2.5 years. Okay. Yeah, if anything, Lisa, we will be taking it from 2.5 to 2 years. It will not be going up, and if anything, it'll be going down. And we'll talk more about it as we continue with the supplemental program. You can kind of see the other options that we have in place for expedited project spending. So next slide. Which one is this? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I got something like popping up. It's like, can't quite see it. So the next category we have is small grants. So with how it was before with the large competitive cycles, we had projects that say, hey, I only need $15,000 to do 6 months worth of work. But they're up against these large projects that are taking a lot of money and a lot of time. So there's not a real opportunity for these smaller type of projects. So we established again, this supplemental program that has different categories within it. First being small grants. So these are designed to be spent within 1 year. These do require a 5% match. Funds can be between $10,000 and $100,000. Again, these are reimbursement basis, and these are open to state and federal agencies, primarily looking to do like trail work or install signage, those types of things, within a time frame of 1 year. So they need to be completed within 1 year. Again, they should be shovel ready. You should have all the documentation in place, all the NEPA, all the cultural, everything ready to go. And then we send that to the State Historic Preservation Office for approval. And you're basically off and running with up to $100,000 once it's approved by the board. So again, just a smaller scale of money to be able to do a wide range of things within the off-highway vehicle world. This next one is emergency and mitigation grant funding. We've seen several trails that have gone out and been destroyed by whether vandalism or fire or a flood and rain washout. And with those instances, we've had to, through the whole process of getting approved through and commissions and having it reviewed and all of those things, and it just takes it seems to be taking too long to get that through the process. What we've established is these emergency grants. We're approved at the staff level. Again, these are going to be on pre-existing trails, pre-existing trailheads that already have all their documentation in place. We already have all the surveys. We have an archaeologist sign off. But these can be between $10,000 and $100,000. No match is required. These are open to state and federal agencies, and can be have to be executed within 6 months, because again, it's an emergency. So you can use these funds for trail washouts, fire damage, vandalism, things of that nature that are emergency. Protecting cultural sites, those types of things. So we've had a couple that have been submitted. State Lands filled in a mine shaft for one. We did a cultural site that was being ridden over that we put fencing around out near Florence. So those types of emergency that immediately impact safety or a cultural resource or an environmental resource. And those are required to be spent within 6 months. And are approved at the staff level and can be applied for anytime.
So I guess I lied earlier. There is one funding opportunity that staff does actually approve. Excuse me, too, and this is one of them. But that's only done to try and get the funds on the ground as quickly as possible.
So the next one we have is, again, law enforcement. With this, you can purchase law enforcement equipment, off-highway vehicles, radios, lights, sirens, suspension systems, things like that. These are specifically for law enforcement agencies only, not search and rescue. These are meant to be on the ground enforcing off-highway vehicle laws, open to state, federal, tribal, local. As long as they are a law enforcement agency, you can apply. Again, all of these are going to be a reimbursement basis. For the law enforcement ones specifically, it's up to $30,000. A 5% match is required, and they need to be completed within a 2-year period. Now, with these law enforcement ones, if you're purchasing a piece of equipment and that's the only scope item within your budget, you are still required to do 2 years of bi-monthly reporting, because we need to know what's happening with that vehicle, what types of citations are being issued, where they're being issued, because that allows us the time, or that provides us the information to better our marketing materials and better our outreach efforts if we know what's happening on the ground. So again, law enforcement agencies only, up to $30,000, 5% match required within 2 years.
This one's been pretty popular recently. Had a number of applications.
Kay McFarland, this project is not required to be U.S. made because these funds are not tied to the federal government like recreational trails program. So these are the off-highway vehicle decal dollars that are generated as well as gas tax revenue. That's how these projects are funded. So those they do not have to be U.S. made. Cables and gates for restricting OHV from sensitive areas. Depending on the area, you could use the emergency mitigation grants. If it's a larger area or requires more than $100,000, you could use the large scale grant to protect that area or restricted area. And then Deanna, repeat what money can be used for. I'm sorry. Which funding category? So the law enforcement funds, they can be used for overtime, staffing, they can be used for purchasing off-highway vehicles, dirt bikes, side-by-sides,
Trailers,
radios, equipment for the vehicles to make them more capable of getting out into the real rough areas. And again, with these, one note that we like to make is if you're using it for staff time or for overtime related to law enforcement, we strongly recommend that you use this as a tool to establish a need within your agency. We're awarding these as kind of a one-time thing per either Ranger District or U.S. Forest Service District or law enforcement office to show a need within that agency. So this isn't every 2 years we can come back and get
a new
more
machine,
overtime
yeah.
and more overtime and a new machine and a new machine. It's kind of a one-time thing to show within that law enforcement agency that there is a need for an off-highway vehicle presence or additional support in that sense. So, any other questions related to law enforcement before we move on to the next one? Or other OHV ones that we've talked about thus far? Okay. So the last one within the off-highway vehicle section is signage. So this is eligible for up to 10,000. It requires a 5% match and needs to be completed within 1 year. This is open to nonprofits, local, state, county, tribal, again, just about anybody involved with the off-highway vehicle community is eligible to apply for these funds, up to $10,000. And these projects are approved at the staff level. However, again, it needs to be on a pre-existing trail with all of the appropriate documentation, and it does have to be reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office to verify where exactly the sign's going to be installed, the dimensions, all of those different characteristics of the signage. You can do kiosks, you can do trail markers, you can do, any type of informational signage along a trail or at a staging area. You can replace damaged or old signs, yes.
That's probably the easiest thing
that'd
to
probably
do.
honestly be the easiest. Like Jeff said, if there's a pre-existing sign and the post is already in the ground and you just need to change the top half, that's going to be even easier because it'll already be documented where the sign was installed. So those would be ideal. And again, with all of these, the trail crews can help provide a significant amount of match, and volunteers can provide a significant amount of match as well. I believe our volunteer rate currently is 2483.
I think we could get that information
And we
for
can
everyone
confirm
though.
that. During our break, I can look that up. But I believe our volunteer rate currently is 2483. So you multiply that times a few hours and a couple hundred volunteers or what have you, and you've met your 5% match for the different projects. So yeah, and these again are approved at the staff level to help expedite. One note with the signage grants, if you have a large scale project or any other project that we've mentioned thus far, and signage is a line item or a scope item within that project, you would not be eligible to apply for this one because this is specifically for standalone signage. Not, it can't be tied to another project that already has signage within that agreement. So, any other questions related to off-highway vehicle recreation fund dollars? Is there a sign grant for non-motorized?
There's no specific signage grant, but safety and environmental education will purchase signage, and just the standard competitive recreational trails program will purchase signage. And I guess it would depend where the signage would go. If it was in, well, we'll leave that for later.
Any other OHV questions? And if they come up, you can just shoot me an email or throw them in the chat box here, and we'll get to them. But here's a few examples of some items that have been purchased or funds have been used for. I believe these are dirt bikes that were purchased for BLM law enforcement. I think that was an education and outreach vehicle for the BLM.
We have to update these slides though, because
Yeah, we have
a lot of new machines have been purchased.
So trail construction and maintenance, mechanized trail work. Again, sheriff's office purchasing a couple side-by-sides. Signage, of course.
All right. The last opportunity we'll discuss is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Land and Water Conservation Fund was established to assist federal, state, and local governments in the acquisition and development of public outdoor recreation facilities. As I mentioned earlier, the program is administered at a federal level by the National Park Service. Eligible applicants include federal, state, local, and tribal governments. Actually, school districts are also eligible for this as well. Like most of our other opportunities, LWCF operates on a reimbursement basis. Again, funds available are variable. It's kind of dependent on the project needs and the proposed timeline. We're certainly looking for bigger, more aggressive projects. We've recently awarded, earlier this year, we awarded Pinal County $1.5 million to develop a new regional park. And really, what was it, last week, we awarded Camp Verde with $2.5 million to help develop a new regional sports complex. Both of these projects had aggressive timelines. They already had all of the required documentation in place. So those are the levels you can look for if your project is, ready to go. Required match for LWCF is 50%. So that's a little bit different from most of our other programs, but can be in the form of cash, labor, or materials. Timeline to complete these projects is 3 years, and this program specifically has got kind of a lot of little caveats. I see a question about LWCF.
LWCF funding still on hold.
You can still submit applications. We're still waiting to start submitting projects to the National Park Service, who there was a slight delay over the last couple months as several of the tribal consultation offices have been closed due to COVID. So they haven't been able to basically send these projects out for consultation. Without being able to do that, these projects can't move forward. So yeah, they asked us to withhold these projects till a certain date. That date is approaching rapidly, and then we intend to begin submitting these applications again. We have a couple that we've kind of been sitting on, like as I said, because MPS asked us not to forward them at this time. So as soon as we get the go ahead, we're going to forward those, and then we're always accepting new LWCF applications. So just some of the important caveats of this funding opportunity, and again, it does have a fair amount. This funding opportunity requires a pre-site visit. If you're interested in the funding opportunity, reach out to Mickey or I, and we'll work with you to schedule a visit. Come out, check out the site. We'll discuss again some of the things we're discussing now with you in person. We'll take some photos of the proposed project area, and we actually have a form, a staff pre-site inspection that has to be submitted along with your application. So we actually kind of assist with the completion of this application. During the application process, staff will, primarily me, I'll work with you to identify and establish a 6F boundary. Once established, 6F boundary, this area must remain open to public outdoor recreation in perpetuity. You're going to hear me say that probably about 10 more times today. That's one of the big parts of this funding opportunity. Any development that's done using these funds, that park basically becomes encumbered and must remain open to public outdoor recreation in perpetuity. There's currently over 750 LWCF projects in Arizona. We are required to inspect them on a 5-year cycle. So we come out there and we realize that it is no longer open to the public for outdoor recreation. You will be hearing from us. Parks and projects receiving funding are required to display an acknowledgement sign. These signs are free of charge to sponsors. If you have LWCF funded parks in the past, and if you know that they're without signage, just reach out to us. We have tons of signage on hand. Reach out to me and I'll send you however many signs you need. Priorities for Land and Water Conservation Fund scoring are derived from the state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan as well as the trails plan. Both of these documents can be found on the state parks website under the publications tab, and I'll show you kind of where you can access those later on. When you're filling out your LWCF application, the score has to be referenced. So you'll get to know that document, and we're actually beginning to start the planning for the next score, which is due in 2023. If the land is being leased by a federal agency, the lease must have at least 25 years remaining for the project to be eligible. This is something that they've been enforcing more frequently. It has caused some issues with some of our projects, but it's something that National Park Service has been enforcing more recently, so it's something we have to adhere to. So if you're in that situation, you're leasing land from a federal agency, that's something that we'll discuss during our pre-site visit. We had a question about this earlier. This funding opportunity does require a 10% surcharge. This surcharge is based on the funding request. So as an example, if you're requesting $100,000 for a project, you have to have $100,000 in match, which can be cash, labor, materials, or other grants. You'll also need an additional $10,000 that will be paid to state parks prior to you receiving your approval to proceed. We get a lot of questions on this surcharge, so I'd like to try and explain at least a little bit, kind of its purpose. We, as in state parks, we receive no funding to administer the LWCF program. But as I explained, the program is pretty labor intensive in terms of reviewing, submitting, and then actually inspecting all of these sites every 5 years. To kind of combat that, the State Parks Board, this was before my time here, moved to approve the 10% surcharge to basically support the administration of the LWCF program. We understand that this prevents a lot of our smaller municipalities from applying for these grants because they don't have that cash just to fork over before starting the project. So it's something we have discussed internally and something that at least we in grant staff would like to take back to our State Parks Board and see if we can maybe make an adjustment to the surcharge so it's not 10%, so we can kind of make it variable, if you will. But that's the discussion that we're still working through, and it won't be resolved anytime soon. So anybody applying for these funds, you will be required to pay the 10% surcharge prior to the agreement being signed. One more thing with the LWCF program, well, there's probably 10 more that I forgot, but just one more that I have notes on. We've gotten this question several times. The sponsor can charge. LWCF has paid for golf courses throughout the state. You can charge for access to these properties, but the charge has to be, I think, directly from the LWCF manual. They define it as reasonable. What that is, I'm not really sure. But I think if we looked at how much you were charging, I think we could pretty much figure that out quickly. So keep in mind, you can charge, but it has to be reasonable. We'll work with you to determine what the definition of reasonable is. Just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that, because we have received that question a couple of times, and I know some of our state parks were developed with LWCF funding. I know regional parks all over the state have been, and they all charge to access the park. So you are allowed to do that. That was a ton of information. Do we have any questions on LWCF program? I'm going to go through some examples. Is that about land acquisition?
Yeah. Land acquisition by the applicant be considered a match. Like you purchased it and already own it?
Acquisition with LWCF becomes a little more tricky. We kind of handle that on a case-by-case basis. We try and stay out of acquisition when possible, but obviously the funds can be used to do it. Is there any more clarification on that, Matt?
So LWCF funding comes from federal. It's not state generated. We just, as the state agency, we're the state agency chosen to administer the program.
Yeah, that whole program is a little confusing. It is actually comprised of two parts, a federal and state. the funding that we're discussing today is the state portion.
I honestly, if Julia, I'd have to talk with Mickey regarding if the applicant purchased the land, because a lot of the times, I don't know if it has to be executed once the project is already off and running, then you would purchase the land as part of your match. Like if it's something you bought 5 years ago and you're applying for an LWCF grant today and saying, hey, we already bought it and here's our match. I don't know that that would be the case.
Yeah, I don't believe that would work.
I
but-
think it has to be kind of in running parallel with the project, in that you'd be buying it during the execution of the grant.
Yeah, and there are certain requirements to purchase, to acquire land using LWCF funding. Won't get too much into those right now, but we can certainly take that to Mickey, and we can certainly do a little bit of research and get you a solid answer.
Jeff, I have a question. Mark Goldberg
Go
with
ahead.
Portside. Mickey had mentioned that they were looking at possibly changing the 50% match to a lesser amount because of COVID and the state of the economy. Let's say that we file now under the 50% and then it changes while we're in progress. Can we drop to the new amount if it changes?
I don't imagine that that's going to be a very quick change. So if you applied now, it's likely it would not occur while your project was underway. Again, there's a lot of kind of new things coming out with the approval of the Great American Outdoors Act, and with the pandemic, a lot of applicants have expressed similar issues, hoping that the match requirements will be lowered. I don't know what that process looks like or what the timeline for that is. So until we get something more solid, it will remain the 50%.
Thank you.
So I mentioned the 6F boundary. Sorry about that. Our office phone just started going off and scared me. So we discussed the 6F boundary map. So this is an example of one right now. Staff actually creates these maps. We'll work with the applicant to define the boundaries, but once that's done, this is kind of the area that when we come out and we do our inspections once every 5 years, this is the area that we actually inspect to ensure that it's still open to not, again, that will require a conversion, which I'll we don't want to get involved in that process if at all possible. So I just want to go through a few examples of what this funding can be used to purchase, because it's really a diverse program. Pretty much anything you can think of inside of a park can be paid for with LWCF funding. This first image is of a restroom shower building at, I forget which specific Maricopa County Regional Park, but one LWCF project actually funded, I think, 5 or 6 of these buildings in multiple regional parks. So I always thought that was a cool project. This next image is a pool, along with all of the associated features. Pretty much everything you see in this photo is an eligible expense for LWCF. This is an equestrian center out in Queen Creek. This for a time was one of the biggest projects, one of the biggest awards we'd ever given. As you can see, it's kind of borderline indoor outdoor. In some cases, this funding is specifically for outdoor recreation. In some cases, NPS will allow the applicant to bring an indoor. I think the case with this one is it's in Queen Creek, right outside of Phoenix, so you can't really make too much use of it during the summer. So that was kind of the reasoning behind allowing them to put a roof on it. We also have something similar up in Flagstaff. I think it's the J. Lively Ice Arena. I think at one point it was uncovered, just open. They realized that it wasn't really usable during the winter, so they eventually ended up enclosing it, and it's now indoor recreation, but it's still an LWCF project. So just use this photo to kind of talk about this. This is actually the Tonto Creek Fish Hatchery. This was one of the early mid-60s projects. Again, we don't see many of these lately, but just kind of in here to illustrate the diversity of the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the types of projects that can be applied for.
So we have a question from Jessica. We have a bank stabilizing project on Wash running through our town park. Is that something that LWCF could be used for? Our budget is about $600,000.
I'd have to look into the stabilization, but really anything else within the park, yes. But let me find out about that, and we'll get back to you regarding that. Just some other examples we have. Any tennis courts, anything in this photo, tennis courts, lights, benches, nets, all of these eligible under LWCF. Skate parks, we've gotten a lot more of these probably over the last 10 years and a lot fewer racquetball courts. This is just a standard old-fashioned playground. I can't even provide an estimate how many of these LWCF has funded. If installing a playground similar to this, we ask that every effort be made to make it accessible. Yeah, that basically goes for any facilities being developed with our funding. We want them to be accessible if at all possible. We understand a lot of these trails, a lot of these staging areas are not, they're in remote areas and sometimes cannot be made accessible. We understand that, but we just ask that every effort be made on your part to make as many features as possible accessible.
And that's with RTP, OHV.
That's with
all of our
opportunities.
all of our funding.
I guess I felt like I was taking good pictures in Queen Creek that day. This is another Queen Creek project. Again, everything in this photo is eligible, from the path, from the field to the lights, the dugouts, all the fencing, the concession stand. So really, it's a diverse funding opportunity. Irrigation, I was going to hit on that, but since we just got the question about it, in certain cases, if it's irrigation to support any of these ball fields, yes. If it's for beautification, no, irrigation is not an eligible expense. But like I said, if it's
Well sites.
I believe it is, because yeah, I believe so. But again, let us get you actual a definite answer. I'm writing that down right now.
Storage tanks.
I believe so.
Yes, park lighting is available.
Yeah, we actually, it's my least favorite project ever. City of Tucson applied for funding for lighting at, I think, like 25 different parks. So just to inspect that project, I have to go to 25 different parks in the Tucson area. So we'd appreciate it if you kept it to one park, but we understand if you can't. So this next photo, this was actually, this photo is near and dear to my heart. This was our last of our initial round of LWCF inspections. This is City of Peoria, Paseo Verde Park. Again, everything you see in this photo, besides the ornamental, the decorative landscaping, is eligible for LWCF funding. The basketball court, the actual basket, the net, the Ramada in the background, all the lighting, the path to the court, all of it eligible. Again, I think this is City of Goodyear. Ramada, trash can, grills, picnic tables, any of your standard park features are eligible. Shade structures for playgrounds, yeah, absolutely. I know this funding opportunity probably generated a lot of questions, and already we need to get you some concrete answers on. But are there any more beautification grants?
I'm not.
I'm not familiar with those, so again, we'd have to look into it and get back to you.
Good questions today, guys.
Yeah, of course, when our boss isn't here.
A shade structure for a playground would be eligible, correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they've done that at all.
Yeah.
A lot of the playgrounds around here, especially especially in the Phoenix area where we are. I'd say those are pretty much necessary.
So an existing LWCF facility needs to be rebuilt, but we want to rebuild it on a different area of the same park. That I've never seen that.
That's getting into conversion territory, which
It's a great area.
that'd be a specific conversation with you talking about your specific project. But just to kind of talk about this real quick. So to give you a similar example that we're working through right now, City of Phoenix, in probably the mid '60s when this program first started, received, I forget the exact amount, but it was only $5,000 to $10,000 to develop Los Olivos Park. It's a small park located in a densely populated part of the city. The city hopes to develop a small portion of the park for a use that's not related to outdoor recreation. So that actually requires them to go through the conversion process with LWCF. So the city is responsible for replacing, I think it's about 4 acres from Los Olivos Park, but it's not based on acreage. This conversion is based on appraised value. So the city of Phoenix received, I don't know, $5,000 to $10,000 in the early '60s. They now want to convert this property, at least a portion of the property. So it's 4 acres. They had it appraised. I think it appraised for a little over $4 million. So they are now they're on the hook to replace a piece of property of equal or greater value. So we've been working that through the process, and we just want we want to make sure that if you're applying for these funds, that a lot of foresight is put into it, and that you're pretty comfortable that this area isn't going to be developed over the next 50 or so years, because that will require conversion and it likely will be expensive. So I just wanted to provide that conversion process and a project that we're working through right now, just as kind of a cautionary tale. Any more questions on LWCF that aren't incredibly specific? You actually, yeah, you caught me. That is Grand Canyon.
I do have one question that's kind of technical.
Yes.
So could the recreational trails program and the LWCF be used in tandem? Because basically we do have a park we're proposing that's in the middle of a ancient trail that runs through San Javier District. So basically it's a community path that the community has used for thousands of years in this area, that we are a tribal community. And the park is being proposed kind of in the middle of that. So could those two programs be applied for in tandem?
In theory, yes. That's something that we, as a staff and our reviewers, have to discuss, because we actually dealt with a very similar situation earlier this year. It's become kind of an issue with who reviews the projects and who ultimately, I guess, whose recommendation is accepted. So I'll just provide a little background. The city of Buckeye applied for funding to create basically an improved path along an irrigation canal. They applied for, I believe it was $80,000 worth of recreational trails program money, and then about $700,000, I believe, of Land and Water Conservation Fund money. We sent the project over to NPS. NPS approved the LWCF side of things. We started moving the rec trails portion through ADOT-EPG, and then during their consultation period, we found out that the city had support of from the irrigation district, so that project was pulled, causing all of that funding, both the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the Recreational Trails Program funding, to be lost.
Oh, wow.
So it can be done. We just have to work out some of the issues kind of on the review side. But yeah, I believe we're still allowing that to be done, but we'll kind of work through that process. It doesn't happen often, but that it is an option. It can be matched like that.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Matt, you see anything come across the chat?
Could a second LWCF grant be awarded before the first awarded LWCF grant is closed?
No, similar to our other applications. You can have one kind of in the queue, but we will not allow you to begin work on the second project until the first is completed.
So just to confirm, we're asking if land acquisition can be used as match. We'll look into that. Jennifer was looking at relocating a facility to a different location, but on the same park or same property. And then Sylvia was asking if a beautification grant can serve as LWCF match. Well, I got those. We'll look into those and get back to each of you individually on those
Yeah, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
as soon as we can. Are there any other questions? We've reached a break.
Yeah, my clock shows 11:41, so I'll call it. We'll get started again in about 5 minutes, 11:46.
Take 5.
Yeah, so we'll talk to you shortly. All right, everybody, thanks for hanging with us. We'll get going again. So we kind of provided the high-level overview of the process. We provide a little bit of information on the various funding opportunities. So now we just want to go into some of the kind of important policies of some of the programs. First is non-eligible costs. So I'll just kind of go through this pretty quick. Food and beverage, landscaping and irrigation, except for the examples that we've already discussed. Development of local or regional plans. Administrative or overhead costs, costs associated with grant application preparation. Operation and maintenance of these facilities or equipment. Any costs incurred prior to the project approval. Costs associated with design and engineering are not eligible for reimbursement without prior approval. Costs associated with environmental assessments and archaeological data recovery activities beyond preliminary reviews and surveys are not eligible, except the state off-highway vehicle program, which may fund some surveys and assessments. And projects on routes and trails that are not approved by the appropriate land management agency or private landowner will not be funded. And we'll kind of discuss that a little bit more shortly.
And again, we have to say these things because they've happened. We've had folks that have submitted for work on Trail A and done work on Trail B, and that is a huge no-no and can get us in a ton of trouble. So, project your a specific task or a specific item that you stick to that budget, you stick to that item. Just
Another important policy is control and tenure. Sponsors must have adequate control project sites to construct, operate, and maintain the areas for the term required by the grant program and project agreement. Control and tenure can be demonstrated in a number of ways. Title fee, land ownership, lease, use agreement, easement. All of that documentation can be used to document control and tenure. Next is the land manager approval letter. This is extremely important for nonprofits or agencies doing work on land owned by another land manager. We have to have a letter from the land manager acknowledging you're going to be doing these activities and basically providing their permission, a signed letter. If you don't have this and you're doing work on land that is not yours, we will not process your application. This is something, again, it's here because it's happened before. Nonprofits have tried to do this on multiple occasions, do work on a specific land manager's land without the land manager being aware. So it's kind of something we implemented to make sure that that does not happen again. Matt briefly discussed this earlier, but another important policy is the 6-month rule. Projects must remain active during any 6-month period. We understand that in Phoenix, Tucson, it's kind of difficult to complete work during the summer months. Likewise, we realize that up in Flagstaff, come wintertime, not much work's going to get done. So really, we ask that you do a little bit of forward thinking, some planning. And if you're not going to be able to actually do any on the ground work, that you plan to purchase materials. that will keep your project active. So it doesn't even have to be. It can be a $25 purchase of a shovel to keep your project active. But make sure you are making a purchase or keeping your project active within any 6-month period. We already kind of discussed this earlier as well. Status reports. Once your project is approved, you are required to submit quarterly progress reports, which is done through our online grant system, Web Grants. Status report due dates are shown on this slide. But if your project is approved in April, we should see a status report for the April to June reporting period come July 31st. We're seeing more and more applicants not completing these status reports, and we just like to remind you that if you're not completing these reports, we will be docking future applications points. So keep that in mind. Future applications will score lower if you have not been completing your status reports. Acquisition projects, similar to the 6-month rule. Project sponsor must initiate negotiations to purchase land, water, or property within 6 months of receiving a fully executed project agreement.
Reimbursement requests do not have any deadlines other than making sure that you stay active within the 6-month period, and that, yes, you are staying in line with the project agreement.
Yeah, like Matt said earlier, it's pretty much up to the agency how often they want to submit for reimbursement. We get some that do it every 2 weeks. We have some that just submitted their first one after the project being open for years. So,
but the status reports are required for, and those are what give us a snapshot of what's happening with the project. And again, highly recommend that if you have the capability to submit claims every 2 weeks or once a month, do it that way, because then we're able to expedite, our review of them in making sure that all of the materials are in place, your receipts, your pay stubs, your copies of checks, whatever those items are, your invoices, making sure that all those things are there and match what you're actually submitting within the budget portion of the claim. That can honestly can be the biggest part in getting your reimbursement process quickly, is if all that stuff is not there, or if it's, here's a year's worth of claims that's going to take us, it's going to take us time to get that processed and reviewed before you're able to actually be reimbursed on those funds that you spent. So bear that in mind.
And once your project is actually approved, we will organize another workshop where we go into more detail about how to submit your status reports and how to submit your claims and all the required documentation for the claims. So. So another important policy, again, one that we've hit on earlier, is procurement standards. If the sponsor is a federal government entity, they will follow their procurement standards. State procurement standards shall apply to all non-federal governmental and other entities to the fullest extent possible. Each awarded project is subject to audit by SPT staff, designees within 5 years after the official closure letter. So keep your documents for at least 5 years. The audit determines compliance with the terms of the project sponsor agreement, and that all project expenditures were allowable and documented. So again, keep these records for 5 years because they may be audited. And finally, insurance shouldn't be an issue for most of our federal, state, county, local government agencies. This is more for our nonprofit partners. They must have insurance, commercial general liability insurance at the amounts below. This can be reimbursed. So you need to purchase insurance, you're a nonprofit. This can be included in your application. All right, that is a lot of the important policies. So we're through that now. Now we'd just like to kind of talk briefly about the application process. We want to kind of give you kind of a workflow of how to go about applying for this funding and kind of help you in the process. So the first step is to reach out to Mickey, and Mickey, myself, or Matt to discuss your project. We'll kind of tell you if your proposed activities are eligible, what funding opportunity maybe it fits best under, and we'll get you set up with the correct funding opportunity. Again, please don't start an application before you talk to one of us, or else you may be filling out an application in the wrong funding opportunity, which is just going to waste a lot of time. So after you've spoke to us, these first two steps are kind of interchangeable. You register for Web Grants, which is our online grant system. Again, that is free, but it'll allow you to view all of our funding opportunities and actually begin an application. Once you are set up in Web Grants, you can go ahead. You've talked to us about it. You can begin, complete, and submit your pre-application. Once it's submitted and approved, staff will reach out and give you some instructions on how to begin your final application. You'll complete your full application. You'll submit it in Web Grants. Once full application has been submitted, staff will review, and then we'll reach out to confirm that we received the application, and we'll let you know any issues that we see right off the bat that need to be addressed before it's moved along in the approval process. So just like to discuss some of the specific sections of the application and really focus on the ones that give applicants the most issues. Again, these applications are pretty detailed. They're pretty in depth. It's likely you won't really know what some of the questions are asking. We're here to walk you through the process. We're here to assist in any way possible. So if you need help, please reach out, specifically on the sections that I'm about to highlight. The maps and photos section. We have some documentation on how to create these maps, but we're working to update it. We received a lot of feedback that these maps looked professionally done, which they were. But really, we don't need professionally done maps for these applications. Very basic maps work just fine for the purpose of these applications. I know a lot of agencies, nonprofits don't have GIS people on staff. So I just want to go through a couple of ways that someone without any mapping GIS experience can make the maps for these projects. It's really simple. One good option is Google My Maps, which is basically Google Maps that provides you the ability to add shapes, points, lines, polygons, different layers. If you have a Google account, Google My Maps is free. Just search Google My Maps and pop up. It's really pretty simple to use. So that's one suggestion. Another great option, and bear with me, I'm gonna I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick. And we're going to change, go over to here. So this is another, if you've been to one of our workshops before, you've heard me talk about this tool, but this is really an awesome tool. This is the Arizona Game and Fish Environmental Report Tool. So I just want to show you how easy it is to create a project in here. You have to sign up. Again, it's free, but you must sign up before using this feature that I'm about to show. But you can use the mapping feature without being registered. And I'll just scroll down on the side real quick just to show you all of the information, all the layers that are already here for your use. I use this all the time, just in my daily work, just because it's got so much information already kind of preloaded in it. All the Habamap layers are in here. They actually started to add parcels from counties, which is awesome. But that's my plug for this. But it's a very easy way to create the required maps for the application. I'm just gonna zoom into our proposed project area real quick. So you signed in, you're registered, you sign in. You'll click on the top, map, which will bring you to the screen I'm on right now. You'll then go, once it loads, probably shouldn't have done that again. If these layers load, we're slowly getting there. There we go. You'll just click on create project. It'll bring up this toolbar. If you have any shape files, any KMLs for your project area, they can be uploaded directly in here by. So that's one option. I think it's just as easy to go in, if you know exactly where your project's taking place, to go in and draw it yourself. So let me zoom in a little bit more. So our project proposes developing a trailhead. It's an extremely large trailhead, but just bear with me. So I'll just go ahead and draw that in real quick. I'll double click. The trailhead, there it is. We'll also go ahead and draw in the trail. The trailhead services. And you'll just point and click. When you're done your trail, go ahead and double click. This tool, for any lines and points, it automatically creates a buffer to better reflect the project area. So that's what it's doing here. I just drew a line, so it's going to add a 10-meter buffer around it. Go ahead and click next, and we'll accept, and you'll see it kind of gets a little wider as they add the buffer. Real quick, we're going to have some signage along the trail. And again, it does the same buffer as it does with a line right here. All right, I say that's good enough. From there, we'll go ahead. All of our activities are outlined in our map, and we'll go ahead and click accept. Then you just have to fill out some basic project information, project title. You will likely use the recreation areas, and then choose whichever option best fits your project. You'll type in a short project description, fill in the rest of this information. Once you're done, you'll click submit. After you click submit, you'll wait about 5 minutes. and the system will email you a report. Within the report is a lot of information. First of all, this is required for the NEPA section of the application, so you have to do this. But the maps can also be used for the map and photo section. So if you just scroll down a few pages, here are all the maps for the projects, if you extract these from the report, combine them into one PDF and put them in the application, the map section of your application, these are more than sufficient for our needs. It also provides a lot of recommendations regarding environmental concerns, which we'll discuss shortly during the NEPA section. So I just wanted to show everybody how quick and easy that is. You have questions on any of the maps, kind of what maps you need, or you need assistance in making them, again, please feel free to reach out. I'm glad to assist you with this, work you through this process. We've made maps for applicants as well, so if you're struggling with this part of the application, let us know. We can easily overcome that. Thank you. So another form that a lot of applicants have issues with is the cultural clearance review form. And it's understandable. It's a pretty in-depth form. So I just want to kind of go through at least some portions real quick. So the purpose of this form is to determine the effect, if any, a project may have on significant archaeological and/or historical cultural resources. To make this determination, the agency must answer the following questions. What's there? Whoever's reviewing these projects, usually ADOT EPG, are legally obligated to know what cultural resources are present within the area of potential effect. The primary way to answer this question is through a cultural resources survey or a historic property inventory. The next, how is it important? If the area of potential effect contains cultural resources, ADOT and SHPO must determine if they are significant in a legal sense. Essentially, this means determining whether the resources are eligible for inclusion into the National Register of Historic Places. Eligibility can only be assessed by qualified professionals. I'll say that a couple more times throughout this. For RTP projects, ADOT is responsible for making the final determination of eligibility unless the property is already listed in the historic register. The next question, is it in danger? If the area of potential effect contains cultural resources and if they are eligible, ADOT and SHPO must determine what effect, if any, the proposed project will have on them. And then the last question, what should we do about it? If the area of potential effect contains cultural resources and those resources are considered eligible, and if the project may adversely affect those resources, ADOT, SHPO, and the applicant must determine how to address these impacts. Options addressing these impacts include abandoning the project completely, modifying it in a way such that the finding of effect is changed, and or taking efforts to avoid the resource entirely, or conducting some form of mitigation. So basically, the purpose of the CCRF is to assist ADOT, EPG, and SHPO in answering those questions. I know a lot of smaller agencies, nonprofits, don't have archaeologists on staff. So in an attempt to try and assist you in this process, we do have access to ASSITE, which is the state's cultural resources database. If you are not aware what surveys have been done in your area, we can take a look and let you know if one has been done. If one has been done, we can let you know if there are any resources in the area. But that is about the extent of the information that we're able to provide. We do maintain, SHPO maintains a list of qualified archaeologists, which we can provide on request. We will not forward these specs to ADOT or SHPO without some form of documentation showing that the area has been surveyed. It's a lot of different documents that can show this. In SRSF, a survey report summary form for negative surveys, a class 3, full-blown class 3 survey for positive surveys. ASM paper site cards can be used. Any documentation of previous surveys, and basically any rulings of adequacy of previous surveys referenced by the applicant. Any opinions, recommendations, or determinations pertaining to the project, area of potential effect from SHPO, the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, the landowner, advocacy groups. Really, all of those can be used as proof that the land has been surveyed.
Yeah, John just asked if the Tribal Historic Preservation Office would suffice.
Absolutely.
Yes, it would. Matthew's asking to restate those main questions really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically the whole point of this form, the CCR of F, is to answer these following questions, these 4. What's there? How is it important? Is it in danger? Does the project endanger it? And what should we do about it? So basically, if there is something there, how can it be avoided?
I'm trying to type what is there? How is it important?
Is it in danger? And what should we do about it? We have a pretty large document that goes into the cultural compliance process. That's another thing that we will gladly send out to all the applicants, and that is another one of the documents that we will post on our website, kind of the help document area, which we're still working to create. Another great resource is ADOT's website, and I have the link on this PowerPoint. This goes into pretty much all facets of their review process. Provides a lot of great links, a lot of great information on what the process is actually working to do and how to kind of go about the process. So I definitely recommend, if you don't know much about the Section 106 and NEPA process, to get on that site and go browse around. There's a lot of great information. Okay, the next section that we have a lot of issues with is the NEPA section. Again, similar to the cultural side of things. We understand that most of these small agencies don't have a biologist on staff. So again, we have that list that we can provide, but a lot of the information that needs to be provided in this section will be, I guess, identified during either class 1 or class 3 survey. Again, we realize most of you don't have biologists on staff, so we can provide that list. Regardless of your status, having a biologist or not, the first step in completing the NEPA section of the application is completing the Arizona Game and Fish Environmental Review Tool. I would actually recommend that as one of the first steps you take when you begin your full application, as it really will help you answer a lot of the questions throughout. So really, ADOT and SHPO, they've been very understanding with us in terms of these projects. They understand most of the time their footprint is rather small, and their opportunity to affect wildlife or any important environmental resources is quite low. So most of the time, completing and attaching the environmental review tool, the report, is sufficient, along with answering the questions in the application. Answer them as truthfully as possible. If it's a sensitive area, we're going to find out it's a sensitive area, even if you say that it's not. So please just answer as truthfully as possible. In some circumstances, additional consultation is required. Like I said, it's usually when it's an environmentally sensitive area or project involves some type of water crossing or access to water. Those sometimes may require consultation with Army Corps, but again, most cases it's not. Yeah, and similar to CCRF, this is pretty detailed. If you have a biologist on staff, get them involved. If not, reach out to us and we can certainly help walk you through the process.
We got a question. Is the PDF of the slides from July on the website the same as what's being presented? I think the only thing we changed was the order of something. Right?
Yeah, I think we may have switched the order and may have switched some of the language, but primarily it's the same. We'll post the new updated one after this meeting, but that one, it's pretty close. So those are two of the, I guess, most commonly messed up portions of all of our applications. We're here to help. We review a lot of these applications. We deal with a lot of them. So if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. So you made it through your application. Now, once it's submitted, we will start taking it through the review process. Again, please click submit in WebGrants, or else we won't know that your project is done.
We have to say it because it's happened.
Yeah, we've had projects hanging out way too long because we never went in to look to see that all the material were there, but the application was never submitted. So we just thought they were still editing. So after you submit your project, I mentioned this earlier, we'll try, internal staff will try and review within 2 to 4 weeks. If we need additional information from you, we'll reach out. But once we deem that the materials, all the application materials are complete, we'll pass it along to ADOT EPG or to SHPO so they can start their part of the process. If they, during their review, if they need more information, they'll actually end up reaching out to me. I'll play middleman. I'll pass their question along to you. You'll respond to me. I'll pass your response along to them. We'll kind of work it that way until they have all the materials needed to complete their review. Kind of at the same time, we're going to start working your application through our advisory and board approval process. Motorized projects will be reviewed by OFAG, which is the Off-Highway Vehicle Advisory Group, AORC, and the State Parks Board. Non-motorized projects are reviewed by ASCOT, the Arizona State Committee on Trails, and then AORC and the State Parks Board. So there's just that kind of differing, the first committee that reviews.
Jeff, I don't know if you mentioned it, but making sure that when they send us documentation related to clearances or NEPA, highlight or notate to us what section of that report or document where we're supposed to be looking, because again, we've had 400-page cultural review document sent to us
Yeah.
with nothing highlighting where their project was within that review.
Yeah,
document.
and that's
So-
still, thanks for reminding me of that. That still happens more often than we'd like. So, I mean, I'd say probably our federal partners are probably the biggest offenders because they get these huge environmental assessment documents and cultural resource documents, and they don't have the time or occasionally the experience to go through and determine what is actually important. So they often just dump the whole document on us, which I don't think anybody who reviews these applications appreciates, but we certainly understand. I work on my end to try and go through and identify if the applicant hasn't done so. I try and identify what areas are important. I'm still kind of learning that, so not correct all the time, but please save me the trouble and try and highlight those before you submit them in your application. Thanks for reminding me of that, Matt. So advisory committees. Again, your project has to be reviewed by the advisory committees and the State Parks Board. We try and schedule these advisory committee meetings and advisory committee meetings in conjunction with if we have projects that need to be reviewed and approved. So we'll definitely be in touch, keep you up to date as to meeting dates. Again, we ask that every effort be made to attend these meetings, at least telephonically for the time being, because it's much easier for you, the sponsor, to respond to some of these questions than State Parks staff, who reviews a lot of these applications and isn't really familiar with the specifics. So we got through that. You've gone through the application process. Your project's been reviewed by the advisory committees, the board, by SHPO, by ADOT-EPG. So just want to kind of talk about the post-award process. We will set up a meeting with awarded applicants to further discuss this, but already kind of mentioned, once it's approved, we'll send your draft agreements. Once you receive that, send us any changes. We'll send you back a clean copy. Once we do that, we'll have our, you'll send back the draft. We'll clean it up. We'll send it back for you to sign. Send us back the signed version, and then we'll have our leadership sign it. We will then return a copy of that signed letter back to you, along with an approval to proceed. And from there, you're set to go and begin incurring expenses, submitting reimbursement claims, submitting status reports, and then eventually closing out your project. It's just make it sound really simple and so quick. So that's just kind of a brief overview of the post-award process that we will discuss with awarded applicants in more detail at a later date. So the end, we're coming close to the end here. We just like to kind of highlight some success stories of some of our recent grant projects. Arizona Trail Association, we work with them a lot. They have a pretty good grasp of the process. Their documentation's always extremely well done. They get the funds on the ground very quickly, and they always well done. So we always like to highlight their projects. We actually have a newer one that they're working on, creating a new stretch of the Arizona Trail. But this is one they did a couple years ago. I think it was in the Camp Verde area. So they just did a restoration, and they actually ended up installing a bridge, some other trail signage. This project was done very quickly. Funds were spent, project closed out. These are the types of projects that we're looking for. And another example from another one of our frequent flyers, the city of Yuma. This is the Yuma West Wetlands. It's used LWCF funding, and I think they're applying to use more LWCF funding in the same area. But another great project. Used to be I believe a landfill that was, it's slowly been recovered and transitioned into a park, and it's kind of a beautiful spot on the river. And we always like to highlight these projects similar to this. All right, so some tips for submitting and administering a successful grant application. A lot of these we've probably beat into the ground pretty good throughout, but that's kind of the point. So first tip, contact Matt, Mickey, or myself as soon as you have an idea of what you want to do. We recommend that you start as soon as possible. You've done this a couple of times. The application process may not be as overwhelming. If you're not familiar with it, it could take some time to complete. Probably go back and forth several times, trying to get it just right. So we definitely recommend you start your application as soon as possible. Ask questions throughout the application process. There's plenty of things that Matt and I are still learning about this process and will continue to learn. You are the same, so don't think that any question is silly. Again, if we don't answer, we'll do some research, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But please don't be hesitant to reach out for assistance or if you have any questions. Most of you have already paid attention to this tip. Attend a workshop. Future workshop dates, those will be announced on our website, so you can check that. I think our next next workshop is November 19th. I think I have it tentatively scheduled for. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. I guess I kind of scheduled it already. It's on the next slide. So yeah, attend these workshops. It's 2 to 3 hours of us talking. We'll miss certain topics during certain workshops. We'll realize that we need to be more in depth on certain topics for the next workshop. So you'll never really experience the same workshop, kind of like a snowflake. So we certainly advise you to attend as many of these as possible, because kind of the information we provide is always being updated, adapted, changed to the times. The next tip: provide required documentation in a timely manner. It's pretty likely that we'll reach out to request clarification at some point. Don't, like some applicants, leave us hanging for a month and a half. We make a request, it's usually not coming from us. So please just provide us the requested material as quickly as possible, and that'll make the whole process quicker and smoother. Consistency. Be consistent in your application. We haven't hit on this as much as we have in previous workshops, but if you say in your project summary that you're going to do You're going to work on trail A and you're going to do X miles of trail work. Keep it consistent throughout your application. I've read multiple applications that, it says it's going to do 5 miles of trail work on trail A in the first project summary, and then in a later section, it's going to be doing 7 miles of trail work on trail C. So that right there is a surefire way to hold up the process of your application. So make sure you're consistent. Next tip is kind of goes with the consistency is, the consistency can lack when you're trying to add all of these fancy extra details. So try and keep everything as simple as possible, but yet still descriptive of the project activities. Don't get too bogged down explaining to us the history of the park or the history of a specific trail, because again, we review a lot of these and we're just trying to determine what work is being proposed and determine if that's eligible. So
Yeah, and with that, with being consistent and keeping it simple, if your project is awarded $10,000 to do trail work and it's awarded and you decide after the fact that you'd like to take that $10,000 and actually use it to buy protective equipment or use it on a different scope item, the process starts completely over because you received approval for working on the trail, not for purchasing equipment. So you would need to have to go back through the approval process to get that approved to say, okay, I actually wanted to buy equipment. So just keep that in mind. And also, we know that if you receive quotes for different products or services and things like that, things change. Within a given scope item, you can have a 10% variation. So if you get a quote and it's $10,000 and it comes in less or slightly over, we can work with you on that to make sure that you're able to still execute that aspect of the grant. But you can't take a ton of money from this, scope item A and say, oh, well, I was under budget over here. I now want to take what's left and put it over to scope item B. That's not how that works. If one scope item has a change, either less or more, within the 10% range, we can work with you on that. But you can't bait and switch and shift and change. So.
And speaking of bait and switch, if you are submitting the application, you are the project sponsor. Once that is approved, we are not going to change the project sponsor. That is something that has to be hashed out prior to the application being approved. So I just wanted to get that out there as well. Don't change on us after the project's been recently approved, because that will it really complicates the process. And then the last tip, which we've talked about plenty of times, click submit. Mark as complete in web grants and submit. Remember those couple of phrases. Whenever you're done a section, make sure you mark as complete, and then once you've done your entire application, make sure you submit, or else we will not know that it is done. So I already scheduled it. So the next workshop is November 19th, 2020. Same time. I'm guessing it will be the same place. I don't imagine we'll have the ability to take this show on the road or to have any in-person meetings as of November 19th, but we will keep you updated on that. We'll have this information posted on our website by the end of the day today for the next upcoming workshop, but definitely check that site for updates, and the link to our site is right there. That page pretty useful. You can find a lot of information on the different funding opportunities that we have. Kind of breaks down the process, the application process, and we're continuing to add more information to it. So please just check it every once in a while. Probably be new updates on there.
Correct, Sylvia. You can't add the numbers. You can't add in an additional 10% overhead.
I
mean, you can add a small buffer.
Yeah, definitely add some sort of buffer. Well, Matt and I are going to hang out. We'll take questions via chat for a little while, but this is our contact information. This can also be found all over the state parks website. It'll be posted on this presentation that is posted on the site. So if you have any questions, reach out to us, let us know. We're glad to walk you through the process, discuss your project. Anything you want to talk about in terms of grants, we'll be glad to discuss with you. So again, we'll leave this up, but that's all we have for today. So we'll hang out for a little bit longer and answer any questions in the chat box, but certainly appreciate everybody attending today. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Are you guys only answering questions through the chat box?
There we
No,
go.
we're answering. We'll do them over the audio as well. Teresa, there currently is not a scoring matrix related to the LE OHV grants specifically. We do have a general scoring matrix for our OHV project, but with law enforcement specifically, because they are so focused on a given task, we just look at them as a whole, not necessarily, for. But we're actually working on revising our scoring right now.
I was going to mention that.
With the motorized and non-motorized stuff, because we just completed our trail plan. So the scoring criteria will be on our website once that's revised.
And a question I have is, so the LWCF funds, there wasn't a max amount given. So what's a feasible amount? Like I have a platinum standard that I'd like to propose, like for the park concept, but like what would be a cap that a feasible cap?
I mean, like I mentioned, we just awarded $2.5 million to Camp Verde. So.
Wow. Okay. That's fantastic. So then by proposing my platinum approach, would it discredit me if I asked for too much? I mean, what's the, would they look at it possibly and say, well, maybe we can award you this much, or is there, how does that work?
We certainly encourage the larger projects. Those are ideal. It would really depend on how many other applications are submitted at the same time.
Right.
We kind of want to distribute it somewhat evenly if possible, but we haven't run into that situation yet.
And if they have the match, then they have the 10%.
Yeah, and if you have the match available already and the 10%, that's gonna go a long way.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any questions?